Hi, I'm Andy Aladort, and this is Guitar World's complete guide to hard rock and heavy metal. In this instructional DVD, we will cover the complete history of hard rock and metal, divided into three categories: 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 21st century. We're going to start off with the 60s proto-metal progenitors like The Who, The Kinks, and the Yardbirds, into the psychedelic rock of Cream, Hendrix, Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath, and then into the 70s rock heroes like Aerosmith and Deep Purple and Ted Nugent. Then we're going to move into the 80s and 90s, starting with the new wave of British heavy metal, featuring bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, AC/DC. And then we're going to cover Randy Rhoads with Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses, and Slayer. And then move on into the 21st century with bands like Zakk Wylde and Black Label Society, Dimebag Darrell with Damage Plan, Lamb of God, Shadows Fall, Killswitch Engage, Trivium and Korn, Slipknot, and all those other rockers. So let's get to it. In the earliest days of hard rock in the mid-60s, a bunch of upstart British musicians took inspiration from American blues music and formulated their own amped-up versions of riffs and songs, originally by blues artists such as Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, John Lee Hooker, and Bo Diddley. One of the most influential of these British bands was the Yardbirds, because it yielded three of the greatest guitar players ever to come out of England, and the most influential: Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. The hard-driving guitar sounds of these guitarists blossomed through the 60s and 70s into the harder rock and metal heard in the music of Jimi Hendrix, Cream, Zeppelin, and Sabbath. All right, the first thing we're going to do is tune up to concert pitch. So here's the low E. Here's the A. Here's the D. Here's the G. Here's the B. Here's the high E. All right, let's start with one of the most important elements in hard rock and metal: heavy single-note riffs. And there are two primary scales found in rock and metal that are used for heavy riffs as well as for soloing. Those scales are known as the minor pentatonic scale and the blues scale. Blues scale is virtually the same as minor pentatonic, but it has one more scale degree, which is known as the flat five. So let's first start with minor pentatonic, played in the key of E using open strings. Now I'm going to play the scale traversing the neck. And here's the scale played in 12th position. Now here is minor pentatonic played in the key of A minor pentatonic. here is an extended position. The minor pentatonic scale is as essential to blues music as it is to hard rock and metal. Here's an example of how the Yardbirds would take a minor pentatonic lick from a Howlin' Wolf tune and turn it into the beginnings of a hard rock and metal type sound. Here it is played slowly. Jimi Hendrix liked to use minor pentatonic, especially in the key of E, for a lot of his tunes. Here's an example of how he would take a blues influence and use the minor pentatonic scale in the key of E to come up with his own thing. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is, played slowly. Equally influential on hard rock and metal in the early days was the rockabilly music of Elvis Presley with Scotty Moore on guitar, and Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps with Cliff Gallup on guitar. Paul Burleson, also the guitar player with Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio, was extremely influential, especially on Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, and they were the original people who recorded Train Kept a Rollin'. The Yardbirds, when they featured Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck, recorded a smoldering version called Stroll On, and the main lick is devised of power chords combined with a single note pedal tone. And a pedal tone is a repeated single note that goes through an entire musical selection. Power chords are 2 or 3 note chords, generally speaking, and I'll show you how they're formulated. If we look at the key of A is our root note. And if we play an A major scale up 5 scale degrees, play the root note A and the 5th, which is E, together, that's known as a power chord, a root 5th power chord. Root 5th. You could also add another A note on top. It's also a power chord if you just play the 5th with the root on top. You could play a 5th up from this A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's another power chord. And then up to the root note again from this 5th. All right, here's a lick that's along the lines of Stroll On. 1, 2, 3, and... Okay, now here's that lick. Play it slowly. So what I'm doing is I'm combining palm muting, where I take the edge of my palm and lay it on the bridge to mute the sound and make a more percussive sound, combined with allowing the power chords to ring out. Okay, the other big scale for hard rock and metal, especially in the 60s, is the blues scale, which is just like pentatonic minor, but it adds one tone, the flat fifth. You play E minor pentatonic like this. That's root, flat third, fourth, fifth. The blues scale adds the flat fifth between the fourth and the fifth. E blues scale, played in open position, is played like this. Here it is in the extended position. And here it is in 12th position. All right, here it is in the key of A, the A blues scale. And here's the extended position. All right, Black Sabbath was a band that would emphasize that flat five in the blues scale because of its demonic sound. That flat fifth interval, known as a tritone, back in the Renaissance era was referred to as Diablo in Musica because at the time people thought of it as the devil's music, and actually I think composers were executed if they used that interval in their music. So here's an example of how Black Sabbath might emphasize that flat five in the key of E, that would be B flat, in a heavy riff. 1, 2, 3, and. In the ensuing years, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up until today, that flat five power chord against the low E pedal tone, or whatever the lowest note is, especially with detuning of guitars that people do today and on 7th string guitars, it's that root note flat five relationship remains one of the strongest and most prevalent in the sound of hard rock and metal. Here it is, played slowly. All right, here's an example of how Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin would combine single notes and power chords utilizing the blues scale in the key of A to come up with a heavy lick. 1, 2, 3, and. Okay, here it is, played slowly. Cream, featuring Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker, recorded some of the heaviest music ever in rock, and forged the way towards all kinds of heavy rock and metal music that came after them. Here's an example of how they would take the blues scale in the key of D to formulate a heavy lick. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slowly. All right, here's an example of how Aerosmith would combine power chords, open position power chords, with single note riffs. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slowly. All right, let's move that pedal tone over to the open A string, and I'm going to play 2-note power chords on the D and G string together against that A pedal tone. This is in the style of the Motor City Madman himself, Ted Nugent. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here it is slowly. Using 2-note power chords and sliding them around in this way is a technique that Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple used all the time, and was one of his earmarks. You can hear him using that technique with the 5th on the bottom on songs like Smoke on the Water and Burn. All right, here's an example of a Ritchie Blackmore type lick using sliding 2-note root 5th power chords. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here it is slowly. All right, let's take this root 5th power chord concept and translate it to harmonized single note lines. This is something that you hear Aerosmith do on songs like Sweet Emotion, and you can hear it in Kiss songs like Detroit Rock City. So if I had a riff based on A minor pentatonic and that riff started from the root note, I'd play the same riff starting from the 5th so that the entire melody is harmonized 5ths apart. So if this is our melody, you'd harmonize it starting from a 5th higher, and because it's a parallel harmony, This next lick is actually played based on E minor pentatonic. So when they move together, you hear all right, here it is played up to tempo on two separate guitars, one playing the lick from A, which is the melody, and one playing the lick from E, which is the harmony. 1, 2, 3, and. All right, another great technique is to have triads that move against a pedal tone. That means chord voicings that change while the pedal tone stays the same. A triad is a three-note chord, and a major triad is made up of the first, the third, and the fifth scale degrees of a major scale. So if you're in the key of A, the 1 is an A note, and then the 3, the third, is the third note of the scale. So that would be C sharp. And then the 5th is E. So we play these three notes together: A, the root note, C sharp, the major third, and E, the 5th. You get an A major triad. Now, there's a lot of great rock rhythm guitar parts where you'll play on the D, G, and B string and move to other triad-type chord voicings while in the key of A, the open A note will be used as a pedal tone. You'll hear stuff like this in the music of Van Halen, as well as The Who and Pete Townsend and Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. 1, 2, 3, and. All right, so what I had was an A triad against the A pedal tone, and I moved down a whole step to G against the A, so the notes G, B, D, and then a D major triad, F sharp, A, D, against the A, and then an F major triad, F, A, C, and then a C triad with E, G, C. Here's an example of how Pete Townsend and Jimmy Page use this technique. 1, 2, 3, and. All right, we started with an A sus4 against the open A pedal and resolved it to A major, and then we did a G sus4, resolved it to G, still against A, and then D with an F sharp as the lowest note against the A, so that was. And then we went up here to play a D sus, D suspended 4 to D, still against the A. And then an F major triad, and then C major, sliding up to D major. The second time, actually, instead of playing D sus, I played G to D. right, two very important songs in hard rock and sort of the birth of metal at the end of the 60s and into the 70s were Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin from Zeppelin 3 and Stone Cold Crazy by Queen from Sheer Heart Attack, and that's from 74. The style and sound and really, angry, mean vibe in both of these songs is carried over into heavy metal in the coming years. Let's start with Immigrant Song. It's played in the key of F sharp minor, which is a great key for metal. And this is going to emphasize just F sharp root notes, octaves apart, and then kind of a jarring chord in between that's based on the flat 5, but it's going to be a 9 chord. So since we're in the key of F sharp, the flat 5 is C, so we're going to play a C9. Here's the lick. 1, 2, 3, and. Here it is slow. Here's a lick along the lines of Queen's Stone Cold Crazy. 1, 2, 3, and. All right, here it is slow. All right, let's get into some hard rock and heavy metal soloing. Just as the minor pentatonic and blues scales were most prevalent for heavy riffs and for chord progressions, they are the most commonly used scales for soloing too. So let's look at some building block basic licks based on minor pentatonic and the blues scale that are used for soloing. Let's start with A minor pentatonic in 5th position as our point of focus. And here's our first lick. We're going to bend a D note up a whole step and have an E note on the 5th fret of the B and an A note on the high E string at the 5th fret. And that lick goes like this. Okay, our next lick is a pull off from C down to A, followed by an E note on the B string. Our next lick is similar. We're going to play an A note, and we're going to do that pinky to index pull off on the B string. Now let's combine the first lick with that last lick, and you get this. With this lick, I'm dragging the pick down for the first 2 notes, catching the high E string with an up pick, and then catching the B string with another down pick. Now let's combine that pull-off lick on the high E from C to A to the one where we pulled off on the B from G to E. All right, here's a descending lick, descends in triplets, and this lick was made popular by guys like Johnny Winter and Jimmy Page. All right, now let's do the same thing with the blues scale, and again, we'll do it in the key of A. Here's the basic scale. You could also play it like this. Or like that. Here's another one. Here's another one. Now let's take a look at some harmonized soloing concepts. Harmonized solos are something you hear all over hard rock and heavy metal. It's a great technique. You hear it in a lot of two-guitar bands like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, Metallica and Megadeth, but also sometimes like in bands like Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin. The one guitar player, Ritchie Blackmore or Jimmy Page, would overdub guitar parts to create harmonized guitar solos. So let me show you how to do that. If we had this lick based on the A blues scale, even though this lick is based on the A blues scale, we're going to use a different scale to harmonize it because it makes the most sense the way it falls. That scale is known as A Dorian. It's the Dorian mode. Here is the A Dorian mode. One, two, three. All right, another great scale to use for harmonized solos is major pentatonic. If we play A major pentatonic like this, and it's made up of the intervals, the root, major second, major third, fifth, and sixth, major sixth, and then it repeats. The way to harmonize this scale is to use a scale known as the hexatonic scale, which is a six-tone scale. It's exactly the same as major pentatonic, but it includes the fourth scale degree. So you got root, major sixth, fourth, major third, major second, root. And a great example of a harmonized solo using these two scales together would be Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. So here's a lick along the lines of that type of harmonized solo. One, two, three. All right, here are the three elements played slowly. The rhythm guitar part goes from A5, B5, to E5. And then the first lick, the melody went. And the harmony lick went. All right, let's get into some hard rock and metal guitar styles from the 80s and 90s. But first, I'd like to get into a topic known as detuning, and actually this goes back to the 60s and 70s, and it has only become more and more popular over the years. In the late 90s, bands started to use 7-string guitars, and a band like Korn not only used a 7-string with a low B to get really low, they would tune down a whole step to get even lower than that. So detuning is actually something that goes back to the 60s with Jimi Hendrix. He would tune down a half step, and over the years Eddie Van Halen did that, and that became very common. So the first thing, tuning down a half step, this is E. A goes down to G sharp, D goes down to C sharp, G goes down to F sharp, B goes down to B flat or A sharp, and high E goes down to E flat or D sharp. And the fact that the strings are detuned, they're a little slinkier, and you get a little bit of a heavier sound. And it's a little easier to bend and do vibratos. Now, there are guitar players that would tune down even more than that, going back to the 60s and 70s. In fact, Hendrix on Band of Gypsys tuned down almost a whole step to a low D on Machine Gun. Right now we're at D sharp. You go down another half step from D sharp to D. And then G sharp goes down to G. C sharp to C. F sharp to F. A sharp or B flat to A. And D sharp or E flat to D. And this, of course, sounds even heavier. And the strings get really slinky at that point. Now, Black Sabbath took it one step further on songs like Supernaut and Into the Void by tuning down yet another half step down to C sharp on the bottom. And that step and a half down from standard tuning is something that really caught on in heavy metal, and to this day is something that you hear all over the place. People detuning severe amounts. So let's go down a little more. If that D goes down another half step, it goes to C sharp. And then G, this A string is actually a whole step down to G. Now it goes another half to F sharp. And our D string, which is C, goes down another half step to B. It's hard to keep track. Our G string, which is F, because it's down a whole step, it goes down to E. Our B string, which is A, down a whole step, goes down to A flat or G sharp. And our high E, which is D, down a whole step, goes down another half step to C sharp. So you end up with a tuning of D sharp, F sharp, B, E, G sharp, and C sharp. And Black Sabbath would use this tuning to play licks kind of like this. All right, let's get into some heavy single note riffs from the 80s and 90s, and we're going to start with one of the heaviest riffs from the 80s. It actually kicked off the 80s, and that's Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train, recorded with the great Randy Rhoads. Crazy Train is based on F sharp Aeolian, and as I said earlier, F sharp is a very popular key for heavy metal, going back to Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin. So the Aeolian mode in F sharp is played like this. You've got F sharp, root, G sharp, the major second, A, minor third, B, the fourth, C sharp, the fifth, D, the flat sixth, E, the flat seventh. So intervallically, it's root, second, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. That repeats, root, second, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, root. Okay, here's a riff played along the lines of Crazy Train. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is played slowly. I had another heavy lick in the key of F sharp minor from the 80s. Was George Lynch's Mr. Scary. George Lynch, certainly one of the greatest hard rock and metal guitarists from that era. Mr. Scary is similar to Crazy Train, but it's based on another minor mode, Phrygian. So F sharp Phrygian is just like F sharp Aeolian, except instead of going from the root note to the major second, F sharp to G sharp, it has a flat second in it. So you go root, F sharp, flat 2, G, flat 3, A, 4 is B, 5 is C sharp, flat 6 is D, flat 7 is D. So one more time, intervallically, root, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and then again root, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, root. All right, here's a lick along the lines of Mr. Scary. Here it is slow. Metallica is another band from the 80s. They would play heavy single note riffs along the lines of what I just played, palm muting on the low E string while playing a melodic figure on the adjacent higher string or 2 strings. The difference is oftentimes they'll change that lower note from a solitary pedal tone to a moving figure along with chromatic figure on the A string as a melodic figure to create a kind of unusual jarring melodic effect. Also utilizing the flat 5 interval made popular by Black Sabbath. So if you're an E, that's that B flat 5. All right, here's a lick with palm muting, and it's all downstrokes played very fast, which is also very important, using all downstrokes. This is reminiscent of Master of Puppets. Here it is slowly. Another essential 80s metal band is Megadeth, led by Dave Mustaine, formerly of Metallica. One of the classic Megadeth riffs is from Holy Wars. It's a very fast thrash metal riff based on a low E pedal tone, a single note played above it, combined with root 5th power chords. And he also liked to use root 3rd harmonies. So I'm going to put all that together in this lick along the lines of what you hear on Holy Wars. All right, here it is slowly. No look at 80s hard rock and metal would be complete without a look at AC/DC, one of the greatest hard rock bands ever, led by Malcolm and Angus Young on guitar. A lot of AC/DC's music is driven by highly syncopated power chord riffs combined with single notes, songs like Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and You Shook Me All Night Long. Here's a rhythm guitar part played in the AC/DC style. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here it is played slowly. Randy Rhoads guitar parts that he devised with Ozzy Osbourne on Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman also combined syncopated power chords with single note riffs. One of the great ones is Flying High Again. This riff is along the lines of what you hear there. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slowly. Iron Maiden is another band great at coming up with hard-driving rhythm parts. Here's one that's made up of 2-note power chords played against an A pedal tone combined with a single note riff based on the A blues scale. 1, 2, 3. here it is slowly. Like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest are another of the new wave of British heavy metal bands, and they also devised hard-driving rhythm parts made up of the same components, two-note power chords against pedal tone like the open A string. So here's an example of how Judas Priest would use the same techniques. 1, 2, 3. Here it is slow. Jakey Lee is the guitar player that followed Randy Rhoads in his work with Ozzy, and his rhythm parts also would combine power chords with pedal tones and single note riffs. A cool power chord shape that you hear on Bark at the Moon is played on the D, G, and B strings like this. This would be an A5 power chord. You got the root note on the D string, the fifth on the G, another root note on top, and Jake would move this figure around against that pedal tone. And also, an interesting variation is to move that fifth down to a flat fifth. Here's the example. 1, 2, 3. Here it is slow. Another technique Jakey Lee liked to use is combine palm-muted single-note riffs played very quickly against syncopated power chords on songs like Bark at the Moon. Here's a similar lick. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slowly. All right, let's get into some harmonized single note lines as they're used in heavy metal music. Iron Maiden had lots of great harmonized lines as part of the written material in the songs. Here's an example of how they would harmonize a primary figure in a song like The Trooper. The chord progression is going to be based on the E Aeolian mode. So to refresh your memory, that would be E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E. So this is a minor scale with a flat 6. If you played the entire scale with power chords, it would sound like this. And likewise, the harmonized lines are based on the same scale. Here it is. Let's talk about the rhythm guitar part first. It utilizes a technique known as a galloping rhythm. which is down, down, up, down, down, up, down, eighth note followed by two 16th notes. One and a two and a three and a four and a one and a two. It's a very common heavy metal rhythm used by Iron Maiden. And you have to work at getting that up to speed and then working up the stamina. I'd hear those two harmonized lines. Here's the first one. Here's the higher line. Another great hard rock band from the 80s is Motley Crue. Oftentimes they like to tune down a whole step like they did on Girls, Girls, Girls. So here's the tuning. Okay, the 6th string E, a whole step down, is D. 4th string A, a whole step down, is G. 4th string D, a whole step down, is C. 3rd string G, a whole step down, is F. 2nd string B, a whole step down, is A. And the high E, a whole step down, is D. D, G, C, F, A, D. Here's a rhythm part along the lines of Girls, Girls, Girls. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. The great Guns N' Roses riff is Paradise City that combines palm-muted single notes with power chords that are allowed to ring. Here's an example along those lines. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. An important development in 80s metal was when the influence of thrash and hardcore punk started to come in. Anthrax was a band that used those elements in their music to great effect, and shifting time signatures also came out of punk, where you'd go from playing something fast to playing something really slow, reggae rhythms like what Bad Brains would do. So here's an example along the lines of Anthrax's Caught in a Mosh. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of the important elements of this rhythm part is the steady downpicking that came from hardcore punk, which takes a lot of practice to get the stamina up and the strength in your wrist. And that's combined with sliding power chords. So here it is played slowly. And the other thing is that all those low E pedal tone notes are palm muted, but the sliding power chords ring. Let's get into some really heavy thrash metal and Slayer. Slayer is another essential band from the 80s, and their album Rain in Blood is a classic. On the song Angel of Death, it plays super fast death metal, and similar to Anthrax with the fast low pedal tone, instead of just doing all down picking like Anthrax had done, this is very, very fast palm muted alternate picking. As fast as you can. It's very helpful to angle the pick slightly at like a 45-degree angle to the way it hits the strings, as opposed to going flat on to go. You can get a little more speed and a little more clarity out of the note. I'm also back to being tuned down a whole step. D, G, C, F, A, D. Here's the example, Slayer along the lines of Angel of Death. 1, 2, 3, and. Here it is slow. And another cool thing about this rhythm part, along the lines with Anthrax, and something that you started to hear more and more in modern thrash and metal, is this sort of atonality where just sort of any interval is fine to hit in almost any order. It doesn't really matter in a way if you're going. Because it's really all about the rhythmic effect and the jarring feeling of the music. Another essential development in hardcore was the Swedish movement of death metal bands, and one of the essential bands from the mid-'80s was Cannibal Corpse. They would also combine fast-moving power chord shapes on the bottom two strings with palm-muted sixth string. I'm still detuned. The entire guitar is tuned down a whole step. D, G, C, F, A, D. So this next example is in the style of Cannibal Corpse. 1, 2, 3, and. So again, just like Slayer, fast palm muted, 16th notes on the low E string with sliding power chords. Another essential band to heavy metal is the British grindcore band Carcass, led by Napalm Death guitarist Bill Steer. One of the coolest things about Carcass is that they tuned way down. They took normal tuning and tuned down a fourth. So what would normally be a low E goes 2.5 steps down to B. And that's the same for all the strings, are tuned down 2.5 steps. So what you end up with is B, E, A, D, F sharp, and B. So one more time if you want to tune up. And I recommend you use heavier strings, much heavier, if you want to tune a guitar up and keep it like this all the time. Another cool thing about this tuning is it's a lot like the bottom 6 strings of a 7-string guitar, but it maintains the same relationship as a normal 6-string guitar, meaning the relationship between the 3rd and the 2nd string is a major 3rd, not a 4th. All right, this next example is along the lines of the Carcass song Buried Dreams from their classic Heartwork album. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. All right, this riff combines 2-note power chords on the bottom strings, played with a lot of chromaticism, meaning frets next to each other, half steps apart, along with octave shapes that are also played sliding half steps apart. Here it is slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. An important band to real heavy metal, death metal, is Morbid Angel, led by Trey Azagoth. And Trey liked to take a 7-string guitar, which normally is just like a normal 6-string guitar, with a lower 7th string, normally tuned to B. So normally a 7-string would be B, E, A, D, G, B, E. But he tunes down an additional half step. So if you've got a 7-string, you can tune it down a half step. If you don't, you can use your 6-string like we did for Carcass, and this is actually another half step down, but then the B-G string relationship will be different because it'll be like the bottom 6 strings of a 7-string. 6 or 7-string, it would be B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B flat, E flat. All right, this next lick is along the lines of Morbid Angel's God of Emptiness. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. And we may never have had a movement known as black metal if it wasn't for the song Black Metal by the band Venom. Venom would tune down a step and a half, a la Black Sabbath on Supernaut or Into the Void. So, to tune that way, you've got C sharp on the bottom, F sharp for the A, B for the D, E for the G, G sharp for the B string, and C sharp on top. This lick is played in the style of Venom's black metal. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. All All right, let's move back into some more mainstream type metal. Late 80s, Whitesnake's album, Whitesnake, was one of the biggest albums, and John Sykes' guitar playing on that record is incredible. Some of the heaviest hard rock and pop type of metal ever. Still of the Night is super heavy, played in F sharp minor, along the lines of Zeppelin's Immigrant Song or Crazy Train. Here's a lick along the lines of Still of the Night. It's based on the F sharp blues scale. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. Another of the heaviest and most successful metal bands from this period is Pantera. Dimebag Darrell wrote some of the heaviest riffs ever in this style of music. So this next riff I'm going to play is along the lines of 5 Minutes Alone from Far Beyond Driven. And on that record, Darrell tuned down a whole step. So you've got D, G, C, F, A, and D. Here's the lick. Here it is slow. So you have that tritone shape. 2 whole steps apart, and it's being moved chromatically. All right, let's get into some heavy metal soloing from the 80s and 90s. I'm going to start with looking at the work of Iron Maiden and the 2 guitar players, Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. Both guitar players played in a bluesy style, but would utilize modes on a song like The Trooper. You hear galloping rhythm, and the solo is sort of based on the blues scale combined with Aeolian. So I'm going to play an example in that style in the key of E. So if we look at E Aeolian, just to refresh your memory, it's just like E minor pentatonic. Except Aeolian adds the major second and the flat 6. And the chord progression I'm going to play over also comes from the Aeolian mode, in that I'm going to start with the root note E, go to the flat 6 C, flat 7 D, the 4 chord A, to the flat 3 G. All played as power chords in a galloping rhythm. It's going to be 1 bar per chord. And 2 beats of A, 2 beats of G. Here's the example. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go over this solo slowly, phrase by phrase. I start with this. That's just E minor pentatonic. And then I go to which is like E minor pentatonic in the beginning, this double pull off 15th to 12th fret on the B string. alternate against a G on the 12th fret of the G string. But then when I bring in the 13th fret, that brings in the Aeolian sound. So that's still Aeolian. Then I move up here for this repeated pull-off lick based on E minor pentatonic. And I'm just alternating between pulling off from 19 to 15 and then 17 to 15. Pivoting against that 17th fret E note on the B string. And that phrase ends with this high bend C up to D. And then back to an Aeolian type of phrase. And then end up to that 9th, which is a nice bluesy sound, and I end with E minor pentatonic, and then this pulls off to the open G for a dive bomb with the tremolo arm. Randy Rhoads devised some great modal solos in his work with Ozzy Osbourne. One of his greatest is his outro solo on Mr. Crowley. I'm going to play a solo right now that's in that style. It's going to be played over this chord progression, D, minor, to G, to C, to F, to B flat, to A. So it's like a cycle of fourths, which is very classical in nature. The lines are going to be based on D Aeolian. And that series of notes makes reference to different modes as it's played over the different chords. Like when it's played over G, it's like G Dorian. When it's played over C, it's like C Mixolydian. Over F, it's F major scale. Then over B flat, it's B flat Lydian. And then when we get to the last chord, the A chord, I'm just going to play the notes of an A triad to wrap up the solo. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, and. All right, here's the solo slowly. I start with this phrase. That goes from D minor, and then over G minor right here. Then it goes to C major. That's over F. The fast triplet legato hammer-on riffs that are played over B flat, played like this. So you can see I just go up straight F major scale or B flat Lydian. And then this transition here sets up the change to the A chord. Ending with the notes of an A triad, which resolves back to D minor. Randy also performed some great harmonized guitar solos. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. We're going to stick with this D Aeolian mode. And if you play a riff starting from the root note, you can harmonize that by starting a minor third higher and staying diatonic, which means to stay within the same scale structure of the mode. So if you were to start from the minor third above, we started from the root note D, you would start from F, and just go straight up the scale. So I'm going to play a riff, and then I'm going to show you how to harmonize it a minor third up. All right, another important technique in hard rock and metal that could be used for themes or for soloing is a technique known as unison bends. What unison bends are is where you play two strings at a time. One of the strings is bent, one of the strings isn't bent. Generally, they're played on the unwound strings that are adjacent to each other. So that means you play a unison bend on the G and B together or on the B and high E together. So if you had an E note and you wanted to play E as a unison bend, you would fret E, 5th fret of the B string with your index finger, and then you'd fret a D, 7th fret of the G string, and bend it up a whole step to E, and you'd get this. If you did it on the top two strings, you'd have to go 1 fret higher. So on the G and B string, there's 2 frets apart, B and high E, 3 frets apart. There's your A, you fret a G on the B, bend up a whole step. Oftentimes, guitar players like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, and many guitar players use unison bends within a mode known as the Dorian mode. So let's look at the Dorian mode ascending the entire fretboard. You start from open G. This is in the key of E. E Dorian. You'd have G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, and then G again, A, B, C sharp, D. So you could bend this A up a whole step to sound a unison with B. You'll hear a great unison bend lick played on the Iron Maiden classic, Run to the Hills. This is going to be played in that style. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here it is slow. All right, let's wrap up this look at 80s and 90s metal with a couple of techniques used by Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads. Let's start with fretboard tapping. Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads both popularized fretboard tapping. And first of all, I'm tuned down a half step the way Eddie usually played, so you can tune up to that. E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B flat, and E flat. Fretboard tapping is performed by bringing a finger down on the fretboard to sound a note, and generally there are 2 notes played, fretted with the fretting hand after that. And you can also incorporate an open string if you want to. So there's a lot of different ways to do fretboard tapping. So you can hit first, sound the note, pull off to a note that's already fretted, and then the left hand hammers on. Or you can do a silent tap pull off, which means you use the right hand to sound a note, and that gets the lick going. Okay, here's a lick played using fretboard tapping in Eddie Van Halen style. Here it is slow. When Randy Rhoads would use fretboard tapping, generally he would use the edge of his pick instead of a fingertip to tap. So instead of doing it like this, he'd use the edge of the pick. Okay, here's a lick along the lines of Flying High again to show you how Randy would use this tapping technique. Started with the notes of a G major triad, G, D, and B, and you tap, pull off, tap again, pull off, and pull off again. Hammer on back from 7 to 10. Then I jumped over 2 strings, played the notes of a B flat triad, moved up 1 fret and back over to the B string for E flat, and then jumped over 2 strings for the notes of an F sharp triad, and then resolving back to G. It's time for 21st Century Metal. And we're going to start with 7-string, and we're going to start with music by the band Korn, or looking at their music. And Korn actually finished up the 90s, but we're going to squeeze them into the 21st century here. And along with using 7-string guitars, Korn tuned down a whole step. So instead of the normal 7-string tuning, which is B, E, A, D, G, B, E, you've got A, D, G, C, F, A, D. All right, this is along the lines of what you hear on Korn's Chutes and Ladders. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here it is slow. And Korn also liked to put little weird sounding high note things mixed in with these super low note things. So sometimes they'll do something like play close intervals, notes that are half steps apart. For the jarring sound. Or we'll also do bends. Like you'll have 2 B notes and then dissonant sounding stuff like that against syncopated, chunky, low rhythms. All right, System of a Down are another great hard rock metal band from the 21st century, and they similarly tuned down a whole step, except they used drop D down a whole step. So it's the same tuning we just had, except the low E goes down a whole step to C. So the resulting tuning is C, and then G, C, F, A, D. Here's a lick along the lines of their song Spiders. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, this lick is made up of sliding octave shapes, played against that open low 6 string. All right, another essential guitar player from the 21st century is Zakk Wylde and his band Black Label Society. These days, Zach likes to tune in that drop D tuning down a whole step, so that's C on the bottom, like System of a Down. Here's a lick along the lines of sort of what you hear on Suicide Messiah and Black Label Society in general. All right, this lick combines single notes with sliding power chords, just barring across the bottom string. Then pull-offs. And then this cool sus2 thing where you lay your finger across the bottom 3 strings to play a power chord. But if you put your pinky 2 frets higher on the D string, you get a sus2 version of that chord. Killswitch Engage are another band that like to use that drop C tuning. And on the song Fixation on the Darkness, you can hear shifting rhythmic fills and single notes played against that open low C bass note combined with unusual dissonant sounding structures of power chords. So here's a lick along the lines of Fixation on the Darkness. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. Shadows Fall is another band that plays in drop D tuning down a whole step, and they like to use shifting, quick-moving power chords against that open low pedal. Here's an example of what I mean. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. In the solo section of the song Inspiration on Demand by Shadows Fall, guitar players play harmonized lines based on D Aeolian. Here's D Aeolian. And while one guitar player starts from the root note, the other guitar player starts 2 whole steps below. And they stay diatonic to D Aeolian the entire time. So here's a lick, a harmonized lick along the lines of what they play on Inspiration on Demand. All right, here's the melody, slow. And here's the harmony to that slow, which is 2 whole steps slower, staying diatonic to D Aeolian. All right, let's bring it way down low with Slipknot. Slipknot tune to drop D down a step and a half. B. F sharp, E, E sharp, and C sharp. Slipknot plays some fast grindcore, and this is played in their style. 1, 2, 3, and... is slow. All right, let's look at some music from Lamb of God. Lamb of God like to tune to drop D, and Ashes in the Wake is a song with a very odd, unusual feel. It's in 12/8 time, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and they kind of combine two different tonalities together. They combine harmonic minor with Phrygian dominant, which is the fifth mode of harmonic minor. So if we're going to play harmonic minor in the key of D, which is what this lick is in, harmonic minor would be root, major second, third, fourth, fifth, flat sixth, then major seventh. So the notes are D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C sharp, D. If you played that same scale, or that same series of intervals starting from A, you'd get A, B flat, C sharp, D, E, F, G, A, and that scale is known as A Phrygian dominant. So then if we were to translate that to D Phrygian dominant, you would get D, E flat, F sharp, G, A, B flat, C, D. Okay, so here's a lick along the lines of Ashes in the Wake. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. Another of today's hottest metal bands is Trivium. They tune to drop D and like to utilize fast alternate pick pedal tones on the low 6 string with sliding octave figures. Here's a riff along the lines of Gunshot to the Head of Trepidation. 1, 2, 3, and... Here it is slow. And another of today's great metal bands is Arch Enemy from Sweden, guitarist Michael Amott. They like to tune, standard tuning down 2 whole steps. You've got C, F, B flat, E flat, G, and C. All right, another Swedish metal band that uses the same tuning is In Flames, and on the song Episode 666, they play harmonized figures using sliding double stops, played against a low pedal tone along these lines. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, here's guitar 1 slowly. Here's guitar 2 slowly. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this Guitar World Complete Guide to Hard Rock and Metal. You now hold in your hands everything you need to know to completely destroy your neighborhood. I'm Andy Aldert, and I'll see you next time.